Hello and welcome, Professor Rasmussen, Chapter 4, Attention. Do I have it? I hope I do. Guys, girls, everyone, this chapter has a lot of information in it. I'm going to start out with a description of some of the theories of attention and how attention is essentially processed within the brain. They're going to consist of flowcharts, and I'll show you some images in a moment, but we're going to talk about some of the theories. So that's what we're going to do in these three parts. Okay, there are going to be three parts. I'm going to try to keep them to a short minimum, but here we go. Okay, so basically just to think about attention, you probably know what attention is. I even said it earlier, do I have it? You're like, I don't know, maybe I'm attending, maybe I'm not attending. You know what attention is. I mean, you use the word attention. So here's a great definition that some researchers still use, some don't. But this is proposed by William James, 1880. Everyone knows what attention is. Okay, just like I said, it is the taking possession by the mind in clear and vivid form of one out of what seem several simultaneously possible objects or trains of thought. And yeah, this is basically what it is. It's the ability to process information and then ignore other information. So this is what we're going to talk about. All that deals with attention. We're going to talk about visual attention. We're going to talk about selective attention, how many objects you can attend to, the duration of attention, so on and so forth. So let's get talking, and this is going to start out with some of the overarching theories. So there's going to be four main overarching theories. Really, it's about three plus a little added-in bonus piece that is not really a new theory, but it's added on to these. All right, so let's go over these. So there's going to be two that we're going to start off right now. These are going to be the early selection. All right, so early selection, early filtering. This is going to be information is filtered early in these theories. Okay, that's just what this is. There's going to be two: Broadbent's model as well as Treisman's model. The late selection model, that's going to be late filtering. So filtering occurs, but it only occurs late in the process of attention. And then the last one isn't so much like a theory so much, but I mean you can call it that, but I don't know, it kind of runs the gambit. It kind of runs in between the bounds here. So you have perceptual load theory, and perceptual load theory is essentially taking into consideration there's probably filtering at some level, but really it depends more so on how much load the individual is under, or rather how much capacity they have to process information. So again, these probably don't make that much sense to you, but they will in a little bit because I'm going to go over them. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to pretty much go over the early selection in this talk. But let me tell you something about these. They're nice that they are all competing in some way. So all those theories that I just described, kind of, mentioned, they're all kind of different from one another. They're developed chronologically. Okay, so one theory was proposed, it had some problems, and then that led to a new theory. Okay, so we know a theory is based on evidence, and it's the best explanation for that data. And so it was the best explanation for the data until problems started coming out with the theory, and then you have to propose a new theory. So the theory of evolution, it's the best explanation for how Homo sapiens are here, as well as all of these other organisms are here. If there is a evidence that suggests that evolution is not right, then there needs to be a modification of evolution. So there you have it. It's a nice little way developed chronologically, theories taken over upon prior theories. These tell a story, okay, and that's the cool thing. So we're going to start from the beginning, and we're going to go to the end and kind of be at where we are now. Okay, so let's start talking about them, and we're going to talk about the early selection. We're going to talk about Broadbent and Treisman's model. These are fairly, pretty easy to understand, so let's get talking. So basically what these researchers use is what's known as the dichotic listening task. The dichotic listening task was developed many years ago, and essentially an individual wears headphones, and there's going to be two messages. One message is going to be played in the left ear, doesn't matter what ear. One message is going to be played in the left ear, and another message is going to be played in the right ear. Now, the one in the left ear, let's pretend that that's the message that is ignored message. That is the one that an individual is supposed to ignore. That's the unattended message. The one in the right ear, that is supposed to be the attended message, okay? So You get an unintended message and the intended message. What the individual, the participant who's listening, what they need to do, or what he or she needs to do, is uh, that individual needs to repeat out loud, shadow the attended message. So, for instance, if in the attended ear it says something along the lines of, "It may mean that religious convictions, la 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 la." In the unattended message, it says, "He came from nowhere special, a cabin, la 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 la." So the shadowing should be, it may mean that religious convictions, la 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 la. Okay? So you have to shadow the attended message while not shadowing the unintended message. Is this fairly simple? Well, it takes some practice, but yeah, it's not so hard. Okay? Now, the interesting thing is when you're doing this task, what happens to that unattended message, to that ignored sentences, that ignored message? Well, oftentimes there's not really good memory for that. There ain't good memory for it. Okay? People typically ignore it and they don't remember what was being said in that other message. Okay? Why? Because they didn't have attention applied to it. But this is the whole dichotic listening task, and this is oftentimes what the researchers use to look at some of this data and create these theories about attention. So what researchers find is that, just like I said, this is oftentimes, Morey and Broadbent, they were early researchers in the dichotic listening task, and they found that people, when they do this task, they miss a lot of information, okay, in that unattended message. Basically, no information is remembered from that unattended message beyond a few things. So basically what Broadbent did is he created a flowchart from this data, all right, from this original dichotic listening task results, and starts with messages in the environment, which leads to sensory memory, okay, which then leads to some sort of filter, okay. But through that filter, that attended message is passed through, but the unattended message doesn't get through, okay. It goes to some sort of detector, something where the individual is aware of it, and now the person can remember it, okay. So this is the filter. This is early filter. Why? Because it happens before the detector, before the person's aware of it. It is the attended message. The unattended message is filtered out before it can even get to the detector. Okay, that's the important part. So I like to think of this as the early filtering. That's actually how it is thought of, so you should think of it that way too. But I also like to think of this as almost like a 40 ouncer. All right. Why did I say ouncer? That just sounds weird. A 40 ounce. Okay, a 40. So you got a 40. You're looking at taking it, and now you pour some, for yourself, or pour some for those people who aren't here no longer, and you pour it and you tilt it to the side. Well, all that drink is not going to be able to escape as easily. There's a filter there, as you can see. All that messages, all that drink is there, and it's trying to go through, and it's getting bottlenecked down, okay? So this is also along the lines of the bottleneck model. You see how this is coming into play? The bottleneck is constricting this information, and that is kind of like at the filter. It's not necessarily so much, a filter like a cigarette. It might be a bottleneck, something along the lines of a 40. Yeah, those are my analogies for you. Okay, so that's the bottleneck model. Now, what does the bottleneck model do? Well, it explains a couple things. Mainly, first thing is that individuals can pay attention to a conversation and ignore other information. All right? So that makes sense, right? I mean, I can pay attention to a conversation and I can ignore others, It is sometimes hard, but we have been known to do this. Now, one thing that it does not necessarily support, it fails to find, or fails at, rather, is that sometimes when we're talking to another individual, that unattended message can get through. Sometimes I'm aware of the unattended message, right? Has that ever happened to you? You're sitting, talking to some friends, and then out of the corner, someone in the room, someone says something, and it captures your attention. So how could that have done that? How could someone's, the unattended message capture your attention if you had no ability to even detect that message? You see what I'm saying? Because that message would have been bottlenecked or filtered out before it got to the detector. So that's kind of interesting. So something's definitely wrong with the bottleneck model. Okay, something's definitely wrong, and let's take a look at this. Okay, so here's some evidence that came from Treisman, all right, as well as others, but same dichotic listening task. In the left ear, it goes 9. In the right ear, it's deer. Okay, well, it's switched ears. It really doesn't matter. In the individual's right ear, let's just take it for what it is. It actually goes ant. So the sentence is Dear Aunt Jane. Okay, so one ear gets the deer, the other ear gets the ant, and the other ear gets the Jane. Now that's kind of interesting. Dear Aunt Jane. Now, in the unattended message, the 976, that's in the unattended ear to begin with, but then now it bounces over to the attended ear. So what does a person hear and shadow when they're actually getting a task like this? Well, the interesting thing is that when these attended words change ears, researchers have found that overall the subject, so this is Gray and Wedderburn, other researchers than Treisman, as I said, uh, these researchers found that it doesn't go Dear 7 Jane, okay? It actually is the participant shadowed Dear Aunt Jane. So that's kind of strange, right? The bottleneck model, what would that have supposed? That would have supposed that the individual would have paid attention to the one ear. It would have said Dear 7 Jane. However, what really happened is the individual didn't necessarily pay so much attention to just the unattended or the attended message in that attended ear. It was able to pay attention to the unattended message, but even in the other ear where the unattended message was started. So the attended message now bounced over to the unattended ear, and they were still able to attend to that message, suggesting that possibly this unattended message, coming through in this other ear is possibly being processed. Okay, this is just one piece of the whole puzzle. So it's being processed to some level. I'll show you a flowchart in just a second. So here's another example. I saw the girl, and then it goes song was wishing, me the bird, jumping in the street. So you're supposed to pay attention to the message in the right ear. I saw the girl, and then it goes jumping in the street. I saw the girl jumping, blah, blah, blah. Whoa, wait, again, that's the exact same thing that we saw in the last one. So the interesting thing is that unattended message is being monitored some level, because if it wasn't, you probably would be saying, I saw the girl, I saw the girl, song was wishing. All right, because you'd just be paying attention to that one ear. But you're not. You're able to switch to that other ear, that unattended ear. So essentially what this is calling for, this whole Treisman, what's known as the attenuation. Attenuation is weakens, so a message is weakened. It's not necessarily abolished, it's just weakened. So here the flowchart is information coming in. It goes through some sort of attenuator that weakens a message, but also maybe strengthens a little bit another message. So the attended message is strengthened, the unattended message is weakened. It goes to what's known as the dictionary unit. Now the dictionary unit, do I have that? I'll have it up here in a second. But anyhow, a dictionary unit is essentially a device. Here, let me pop it up here. Where words are stored, and each word that an individual has stored, it's going to have a different threshold level, meaning that if the threshold is low for the word, then it doesn't need the unattended message. If that word is in the unattended message, it'll easily be detected. Now, if that word is very, very high in threshold, then it might not even be detected overall. Okay, I'll show you a graph in just a second. But the dictionary unit is just an area where you store words, and there's some sort of threshold that is achieved by each of these words, or a threshold is declared for each of these words. But let's get back to it. So the dictionary unit, information comes into the dictionary unit, and that is going to be essentially where you're aware of this, and it's going to go to memory. Okay, so this is still considered an early filtering model because it's prior to that dictionary unit, prior to where you're going to start to be aware of this object, or this message rather. Okay, so it still gets filtered out before this awareness. So the message gets passed to the dictionary unit, just like I said. This threshold is a small signal strength that can just be detected. So let me give you an example here. So you have three different words. You have your own name, rutabaga, and boat. And oftentimes you'll know that if you're you're hanging out, you're at a cocktail party, and you're talking to someone, and they're talking about, stocks and bonds and derivatives and the economy and Donald Trump and President Barack Obama and so on and so forth. Sorry, I should have said President Donald Trump, so on and so forth, right? And you're paying attention to him, but out of the corner of the room, like I said earlier, you hear someone say Matt, and I look immediately and I turn. This is known as the cocktail party effect. Cocktail party effect is when you're hanging out somewhere and you hear your name. Oftentimes you're going to orientate to it, or you're going to at least be aware of it. It's hard to ignore. So your own name has a very, very small threshold. So, if someone kind of whispered that word, you'd probably be aware of it. Rutabaga, on the other hand, though, someone would have to yell rutabaga across the room, and then you'd be aware of it. The word boat, you'd probably be, aware of it, if it was said at a moderate tone. But anything below that threshold right there, that red threshold, might be easily detected. That's kind of what Treisman and others propose. Okay, so there you have it. This is the Treisman attenuation model, and again, this is an early filtering because the individual filters out information, attenuates the information, weakens the information prior to the detector. Alright, so the attenuation model explains the ability to attend and ignore messages, just like in broadbents, but it also allows for the low level, essentially this monitoring of the unattended message at a low level. Now again, you're not going to be able to monitor it and be able to understand and remember everything or even many things that are being said in the unattended message. This model is not saying this, but what this model is saying is that the unattended message is monitored to some extent, and if something that pops up in the unattended message is important, like a switch in meaning of the unattended message, well then that unattended message is going to quickly turn into the attended message, and vice versa to the attended message, it'll turn into the unattended message, as demonstrated by Dear Aunt Jane. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, in my next talk, I'm going to hit up theory of attention number 2. Thanks for tuning in to number 1, and I'm going to leave you here.